So welcome everyone. Good afternoon to all of you who have gathered here, and to the people who have come and to attend this lecture from a lot of other parts of the world as well. So today we have Dr. Przemyslaw Ozierski, who will be speaking to us on perhaps the most important thing in geopolitics which is happening currently, on the Russo-Ukrainian war and what it means for the geopolitics of Europe. I won't be giving a big introduction and pointing the speech or the lecture by Dr. Przemyslaw for you. I'll hand over the floor right now to the moderator of this session, Mr. Vineet Krishnan, who's a PhD scholar at the Department of Geopolitics and International Relations. But first of all, welcome Dr. Przemyslaw Ozierski. Yeah, you are not a stranger to this department. You have given a lecture here before, and we are glad to have you once more to give your perspective on what is happening right now in Europe. This is something which the rest of the world is watching with great deal of concern. So with that, I'll give the floor to Mr. Vineet. Vineet, please.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. And yes, I wish it was Dr. Vineet too, myself. But yes, I'm a PhD scholar here at the Department of Geopolitics, MAHE, for the information of Przemyslaw Ozierski, who's joined us here today from, I believe, Kyrgyzstan, sir. You're in Kyrgyzstan today.
Yes, I'm Kyrgyzstan right now, but you could think that it is far from the conflict, that such country in Kyrgyzstan is not involved in the conflict, but in today's world, in this global perspective and even military perspective, you could find clear links. Yes, even the discussion about resolution concerning the Ukraine, it was yesterday. And okay, India abstained, I saw, Kyrgyzstan also abstained, but it still began, let's say, was criticized for not taking the step forward, yes, and not, let's say, supporting the clearly like 100% Ukraine, okay, because even I believe that even the countries that abstained and left, yes, they do not support war as a tool in international, let's say, relation in solving conflicts. And plus, many people forgot, okay, the Kyrgyzstan, it's also the home for the Russian unified base in Central Asia. It's not the base, it's avia base, but not only, because you have here the base that is used for the naval forces of Russia, the strategic forces. So when Russia put on alert its deterrence forces, so it was clear that also the small, let's say, small base in Kyrgyzstan was also in use. So this is, let's say, very difficult, a very challenging situation for the whole world.
Certainly, I'm sorry to cut in there in between, but it's extremely right what you're saying, that while in particular this case of Kyrgyzstan, well within still the Russian sphere of influence, it's not just in Ukraine or in the European theater that the consequences of this war are being felt. Certainly, the topic that you will be speaking on today is implications on Europe, for Europe, but we are here today in Manipal, in Karnataka, in India, southern India. You've spoken to us before, so I'm sure you're aware about our university and department. And a few days back, things came quite close back to home for us as well, when about less than 6 hours away from here is the hometown of the Indian student who died in collateral damage during the war which is going on. He died in Kharkiv as well a few days back. So you're right, this is yes, it is. The theater is Ukraine. The implications are not just for Ukraine, not just for Russia, not just for Europe. In fact, pretty much for the whole world, could get and has already at diplomatic level got dragged into this confrontation as well. So my job here today is just to give you a brief introduction of the speaker, also to just set the stage as it may be. Of course, the stage doesn't need much setting. I'm sure all of us here in the department, as keen followers of international politics, international relations, have been following what's been happening in Ukraine over the last many days, ever since the offensive began on February 24th. In fact, for the information of our speaker, I'd also like him to know that we ourselves in the department have had two discussions before, internal discussions before among students and the faculty on this very topic, one after and one which we had actually done a couple of weeks before the conflict, and a lot of what had been discussed that day essentially became portended gloom in a sense, right? So today, again, because you're joining us via this video conferencing platform, I would just like to let you know we have about 50 odd students here and faculty members at the venue at the department here. And we have quite a few people who have joined online as well. And as Dr. Anand had pointed out, Luana has joined us as well. She was here at this department when I was here in my first semester for masters, all the way back in 2012. So great to meet another old face, reacquaint with another old face after quite a while. So anyway, enough in terms of introductions, I guess. Let me give you a brief of the speaker for today, Przemyslaw Ozierski. Now, the speaker today has, as you guys are well aware, has spoken to you before in the very recent past. He's an independent security expert working on a lot of issues, particularly pertaining to the Central Asia region, but not exclusive to it. As I mentioned, he is from Poland. In fact, he has an MA in political science from the University of Zielona in Western Poland, and as well as an MA in cultural studies from the Center for East European Studies, University of Warsaw. And of course, the University of Warsaw is a department, is a university we have close ties with here at the department as well. Also, the speaker today will be able to give us a very interesting perspective, having been both a Fulbright scholar in the US, as well as having been in Russia as part of a scholarship program for the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation. He has cooperated extensively with organizations such as OSCE, for example, which we hear a lot of in this particular conflict, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. As well as OSCE Academy. He has also worked with the American University in Central Asia, the National Institute for Strategic Studies in Kyrgyzstan, as well as various other places, including universities in Tashkent, Shanxi Normal University, as well as working with the University of World Economy and Technology. Recently, during 2018 to 21, he had served as the head of the Foreign Trade Office of the Polish Trade and Investment Agency, from where I believe he knows Luana as well. And currently he is researching, he's an independent researcher in partnership with PIL Research Company and the Center for International Private Enterprise, looking into issues such as corrosive capital. He's an avid follower, commentator on issues to do with this particular region that we're talking about. And certainly this conflict, like we had mentioned, which has brought in the whole world, but primarily also as a central figure, NATO, of which Poland is a member, the European Union, of which again, Poland is a member, again seen as a leader of New Europe as well. And this is a conflict which has not begun today or yesterday or even February 4th, 2022. Its roots go well back, at least up to 2013, 2014 period, maybe even further behind. The deposition or the removal from power of Viktor Yanukovych, the fourth president of Poland, and everything which has happened since then, leading up to Russia invading, first of all, recognizing the republics of Luhansk and Donetsk, and then invading Russia, first as a military standoff strike for the first 4 to 5 days, and then later as conventional. So that is where we are today, and we are all extremely interested, extremely waiting with bated breath, in fact, to listen to the speaker that we have today. Przemyslaw Ozierski, sir, your stage is set. You can take it forward. We will just pan the camera now so that you would be able to speak, in a sense, to the students directly and not just see my boring face alone. So we will just do that now, sir. The stage is yours. Please begin your lecture. Thank you.
Okay. So, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you for the introduction, and you mentioned that it's not the conflict of the last few days. Yes, that is the background. It's the base. It started in 2014 with the situation with Crimea in Donbass. The conflict in Crimea was frozen, I would say, in 2014 when the war in Donbass was going on for the last few years. Yes, and it is very important to see that the war in Donbass was never, let's say, the frozen conflict. Yes, that there was casualties on both sides. There was the use of the forces of both sides, and it's important to understand, let's say, the casus belli. I would say the explanation that Russia is using actually to let's say to start the war. Yes, I will use the definition that it is the war. Okay, in Russian media it is called limited operation, but it is not. And it could be called the war. Yes, there are the different definition of the war related to the number of the casualties. That it's 1 year, it must be, let's say, 1,000 combat-related casualties. Now it's more than 1,000. So we're discussing the war. Yes, and the war. It's also the issue of international humanitarian law. And it's important. Okay, I will show you something which is okay. Show the definition because okay, share, but this is not there. Okay, it's when you're students and studying the geopolitics, the security, you need to have in mind international humanitarian law, and especially if you are military, you're serving in the military, you also need to know the international humanitarian law and what are the rule of engagement, rule of conducting the war, and they are clear. And they shall not be the matter of discussion. Okay. And the matter, let's say, of an attempt to justify the military actions. Okay, so what is important if we discuss this war? Yes, that even the Russia trying to explain its engagement. Okay, there is important issue of limiting suffering. Okay? So when the war started. I was personally thinking that it's going to be the limited operation after the recognition of the Donbass, that Russia is going to secure, let's say, Donbass and Lugansk. The most is going to open the Crimea channel and allow the water to flow to the Crimea. But something happened that Russia went farther. Yes, went farther. Went further and decided for the maybe not the full scale, but for the war. Yes, for the war, because if we see the entrance of the Russian army and the operations, it's clear that Russia decided to encircle, to besiege such cities as Kharkiv, as Kiev, and I believe it's a step too far. It's a step too far, and it is bringing the level of the casualties much unacceptable level. Okay, if any level of the casualties unacceptable, but here something wrong happened. Let's say in Russian military planning, and we have the situation when Russia, I believe, Russian leadership is trapped in this mistake. And trying we still, let's say, don't know what the Russian leadership want in this situation, okay? Because there is different messages from the Russian side, okay? The Minister Lavrov a few days ago told that Russia don't want the capitulation of Ukraine, okay? So if the Russia don't want the capitulation, so what Russia want, okay? The Russia want to have the guarantees of NATO. Okay? And there's long discussion about the guarantees that Ukraine would not join the NATO. It's also, I believe, the failure of the Western diplomacy. Okay, that NATO was somehow manifesting the open door policy. Okay, even despite the fact that open door policy is limited, because in line with the regulation of NATO, you cannot accept to NATO the country that do not have regulated borders. Yes, so it's the same situation with Georgia, with if there is South Ossetia, Abkhazia, and this part of the territory is unrecognized territories, I would say. So you cannot take such country to the NATO. And the same with Ukraine. You cannot, with the Donbass situation in Donbass, as the situation was before 24th of February, you cannot accept Ukraine to NATO with the problem in Crimea, with the problem with Donbass. But there was no clear signal from the NATO. Okay. With the European Union and aspiration of Ukraine to join European Union, it was clear that the situation to 2014 was about the joining of Ukraine to European Union. Okay? The Yanukovych decision to withdraw from the accession process. Okay? Now it's clear. It's the latest, let's say, steps of the European Parliament to support the accession of Ukraine to European Union. I believe very, let's say, symbolic gesture of the European countries that they stay in solidarity with Ukraine. Okay? So many mistakes of the Western diplomacy, many mistakes of the Russian diplomacy, and Ukrainian, I would say, not the war, even that this is a tragedy of the people on the ground. Difficult now, let's say, to predict how the conflict would be developed. Yesterday, President Putin told that the military operation, going to be prolonged, going to be continued. I'm discussing with many experts, with my friends in Russia, and they are preparing for the long war. Okay, they bringing the comparison to the Iraq war, that this didn't happen, let's say, in a few days. It took weeks, months. Yes, so that is the scary situation, because if it's going to escalate, Europe would, let's say, would need to react. NATO would need to react more. So we have the situation that Russia is not, let's say, bringing the solution. There is no, okay, we have the discussion, we have 2 rounds of the peace talks, okay, one on the border with Belarus, one of the border with Poland. With the Belarus, it's even more, let's say, difficult because the Belarus is the part of the military operation, okay, of the war. It is supporting the Russian military forces on the ground, so it is part of the conflict. So there's okay, the limited operation. It's nothing like this right now in the case of Ukraine. Okay, if we're discussing because Dr. Arndt asked me if I can provide let's say the ethnic background of the conflict, then ethno-linguistic. Okay, I would say that such contexts they are there, yes, but the war, let's say, that started on 24th, totally, let's say, remodeled the situation. Okay, when we look, the last census on Ukraine, the national census and linguistic census was 2001. So it was 20 years ago when we see the data, and still, and if we look at the maps of that, let's say, period, we could see, let's say, where the Ukrainians are more, let's say, presented, where the Russians are more presented. We have this linguistic, let's say, layer, yeah? Because even some Ukrainians, they speak Russians, they speak Russian language, yes, and it's not the problem at all. I would say it's not the problem. I'm calling the people that are in Kharkiv hiding because of the, let's say, Russian bombs flying, and we speak Russian. We speak Russian, so it's not the language conflict, no more. It's not the ethnic conflict. It's the situation. It's the interstate war when one state decided to conduct a military operation on the territory of other independent states. Okay, so let's look at the maps. Okay. Okay. That's actually okay. The ethnic. Okay, can you see the map? No, it's not working. Okay, can you see the map or not?
As in, they're not open yet, but we can see the folder. Yes.
Okay. Okay, not very good one, but it's Ukrainian map. It's also now. Can you see?
I'm guessing it's just taking time. It's probably
okay.
Just take a second.
So, but this war is not about, let's say, ethnic issues. It's not about linguistic issues. Okay, because before 2014, we have the situation when the one side of the Ukraine was voting for the more pro-Russian, let's say, president, and the second half, the western part, was voting for the pro-Western one. But if you go and look at the,
we get unable to see.
It's working.
Yeah, it's still
okay. So, okay, I guess the connection is too weak. So I would stop. Okay. Okay. So, but okay, like to have the schematic view of the Ukraine, yes, and the schematic view that is still in use by the Russian side, I would say, because the Russian side try to explain the conflict using, let's say, the old schema, let's say, models of thinking about the Ukraine, that the Ukraine is divided, that there is eastern part that is more prone to Russian world, and the western part that is more towards European Union than the Western world. In fact, it's the old story. It's the old story, yes. In 2014, Russia decided to take the most, let's say, pro-Russian region, which was the Crimea. Yes, but still the very difficult, like microdynamics within the Crimea so different. Okay, the Donbas conflict escalated, but it's also it's not that the people of the Donbas were 100% towards the Russia. Yes, but they're old stories. Okay, like now in 2019, when you even try to look at let's say at presidential elections and how current president of Ukraine won, Mr. Zelensky, he won in whole Ukraine. The whole Ukraine was colored, it was green, so let's say it was the support was everywhere. So it's the legitimate president of the Ukraine. Okay, the Ukraine that changed, that evolved after 2014. Yeah? The Ukraine that was accelerating the process of nation building. It's different, okay? Discussing, let's say, listening to the debates of the Russian expert, also the specialists in on ethnics and ethno-linguistic issues. And they also recognize this, that something wrong happened, that the Kremlin was not informed, was maybe disinformed, that no, that people in Ukraine do not go, that the people in Ukraine, they are not going to welcome Russian troops. Okay, even in 2014, maybe in some cities you will see the people that welcoming the Russian troops, but in 2020 to 2022, it's totally different. Okay, the people were not waiting. It's the way the people, Ukrainian people, feel the Russian troops as aggressor. Okay, and this is you can use the media to let's say to let's say build, to create different pictures, but the information is so massive. The information is so massive, and there are so many, let's say, journalists on the ground in Ukraine, and the people showing that they different. They're not part of the Russian mirror, let's say Russian world anymore. Yes, it's this expression of Ruski mir, so Russian world in Russia that is going to build, and President Putin is telling that Ukraine is part of the Russian world. It's not. It's not. Ukraine after 2014 went towards the modernization process, toward the changing of the, let's say, of rebuilding, reinstating, enforcing, let's say, its national identity. Okay, and now to use this, let's say, the old schema to explain, to motivation to conduct military operation, it's wrong. It's don't have the, let's say, the background, okay, right now. There is discussion now in Ukraine, what in Ukraine, even in the world, even in Russia, what Russia is going to propose to solve the conflict somehow, to build some, and there is discussion that Mr. The former president, ex-president of Ukraine, Mr. Yanukovych, that escaped in 2014, is going to be proposed as the president of some kind of form Ukraine to finish his term. But if you look how the people in Ukraine look at the former president of Yanukovych, so this is the guy that is famous of golden toilet in his residence. You know, that is in 2014 when people went to his villa that was emptied. If they found the, let's say, the different things made of gold. So it's difficult, let's say, to propose such person as some, let's say, compromise, as some solution. So we are watching very, let's say, very, let's say, difficult process of finding the solution towards the let's say, the conflict. Okay, so yesterday, the second round of the, let's say, peace talks, the results, humanitarian corridors would be secured. We'll see how they're going to work, because it's very important to have this the corridors to evacuate the people, but no, let's say, political solution that would bring the peace to the area still. Okay, the process, the military operation going on everywhere, the shellings they are occurring. Some people, some also military experts say that the Russia is not using the full force. Yes, it is like this. The Russia is not using the full force. Still, the aviation is not fully, let's say, employed. Still, the artillery is not fully employed. If it's going to happen, there will be more casualties. Yes. So if what stage of the military operation it is, it's difficult to say. Yes, but Russian experts, they are preparing for the long war, unfortunately, and the consequences for Europe. Okay, direct consequences. First of all, the flow of refugees. Like 600,000 refugees in Poland, as of yesterday information of the border, let's say, border guards. So huge inflow. If Poland is going to cope with the such amount of refugees, I believe yes. I believe yes. Some, let's say, implication even like for Polish political scene. Okay, the conflict. The Polish political scene united around the Ukraine. The very divided, very polarized society, divided in concern to Ukraine, let's say, conflict. It's fully supportive for the Ukrainian nation, I would say. But what's happening more like? What are the like further consequences? Okay, if the conflict is going to be prolonged, we see the prices. We see the prices of natural gas. Okay, the prices of natural gas, they influencing the prices of other products. The prices of the oil. Okay, again. Okay, the prices of oil also influencing, let's say, the food prices. Then we have the wheat. Okay, Russia, the biggest exporter of wheat. What's going to happen? How it's going to be? We don't know. Ukraine, like 6th place in exporting countries. What's going to happen with this? We don't know. Okay, aluminium prices. Again, like Russian Rusal stopped the export to Europe. Steel. Okay, steel export from Russia, steel export from Ukraine stopped. We have the, let's say, the prices for the construction materials for steel products, they are rising. Okay, if it's the war plus it's sanctions. Sanctions is they have they influencing both Russia and Europe. Okay, to which level it's disputable, but such the level of sanction that is applied toward Russia is enormous. That those are the indiscriminate sanctions, I would say, towards Russia. They're hitting like every sector of the Russian economy. They hitting the authorities, they hitting the oligarchs, but they hitting also the normal people. Okay, it's also the problematic of the sanctions, like how the sanctions going to influence. Okay, because now the West, Europe, European Union, United States, using the sanctions to stop the aggression. Okay, but what going to happen next? How long the sanctions is going to be, let's say, applied toward Russia? Okay, because we know like how the sanction they are working towards Iran and how they influence the life of the Iranian people, and how they how they are going to influence the life of the Russian people. Now I have the signals in Russia that some medicaments were stopped, the transfer, so medical equipment started. So if the war is going to be prolonged, there's going to be humanitarian catastrophe, not only in Ukraine, but also in Russia. The Russian people also would suffer, I would say. That is the, let's say, the test for the diplomacy, for the humanitarian organization, how they're going to deal with this. what kind of mechanism going to be, let's say, developed. Okay, Ukraine, I believe the Western countries would support Ukraine, would rebuild the Ukraine, would support the Ukrainian people and reinstate, let's say, the economy of Ukraine. What's going to happen with Russia? Difficult to say. What kind of economy is going, what kind of economic relations they're going to be, let's say, in place. Right? In Europe has the mechanism of trading with Iran, the barter exchange, the barter mechanism. How it's going to work with Russia, still we don't know. Okay, how it's going to influence, let's say, such countries as India, another question. Okay, I see that there is a question. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, sir. Can
Yes.
you hear me?
We can
Yes.
have the Q&A after the lecture is over.
Okay. Fine.
I guess, Dr. Anand, I guess we can move to discussion. Yes, we can move to discussion to because it's better that it would be more interactive. Okay, so maybe yes, I welcome your question.
Yeah, if you are completed your points.
Yes, I believe I completed, because I can talk. Yes, but it's better to have discussion. To have the discussion.
Certainly, sir, and you're right. It's a very the nature of the event, the nature of the beast, what's happening, and it's evolving every day. So certainly, it would be. I am sure in the last 1 hour itself, things must have progressed quite a bit on the ground. So certainly, let's keep this more in the discussion mode if that is what you prefer to, sir. And the first question, sir, could you please go ahead with your question? We'll come back to questions here from the students after that.
So, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, sir. It's a wonderful presentation, and in fact, I'm not from geopolitical domain background. I'm from financial market from the Department of Commerce. But it's really a very nice event which has been organized by the Department of Geopolitics. I really appreciate that. In the contemporary time period, if you see now, this is talk of the town for all over the world. I just wanted to ask you one thing. When this NATO was created against the Soviet Union, right? That is, we all know, because the Western powers and US, they're having the other way of thinking that they may, Soviet Union may annex, or they may be very, very aggressive. But in the year 1991, Soviet Union collapsed. And from 1991 to, if you see onwards, so many countries, including, if I remember, I'm not very much, but if we see Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, all these countries, they have got the membership. Continuously, NATO is increasing its membership to the eastern side of the European this thing, and where Russia is saying that there is no problem from our side, don't do that because you are coming very near to the Russian border, and that is disturbing Russia, which has been told in every platform. Why European nations are not understanding this, that putting sanctions, putting Russia into aggressive things, it is not going to give benefit to the European nations. Majority of the energy requirement is coming from Russia. My question is, why does European Union and other members other than USA, other members in the NATO are not understanding this? Thank you so much.
Okay, you know, that's the questions that I'm asking myself for a very long time. Okay, I don't know, that there's a problem with communication. The problem with communication, with understanding of Russia, I would say. The position of Russia was presented many times at many discussions. Okay, there is in Europe, I would say, this strive to, let's say, to expand, and also, let's say, like, you can explain this in the theories, yes, but the NATO, in my opinion, it's also bureaucratic. It's also bureaucratic, let's say, mechanism that is looking for, let's say, for new sense of life. Okay, after 1991, no Soviet Union, so no, let's say, the clear, let's say, defined enemy, I would say. Okay. But so there was this drive, let's say, for the NATO to expand, to transform and expand, okay, to reform those countries, because NATO, it's okay, it's also about reforming, about the bringing certain principles for the nation's national armies. Yes, thanks to NATO, Polish army reform introduced also like this kind of human rights. Yes, the security sector reform, and yes. I guess many people forgot about the old Soviet school, what was the Soviet mindset and the thinking of geopolitical thinking. And Vladimir Putin is such a person of this mindset, yes. You can use very different words, also the bad words, as some analytical, let's say, analytics in Europe they're using. You can say that it's unreasonable, some behavior, yes. But I'm listening to my colleagues in Russia, and they're saying that yeah, the war is also the solution. The war is also something that you can use. So if you are NATO, you should understand that there you have the, let's say, the belligerent, let's say you have the other sides that is able to use military force. So I agree. That's why I told that there is the problem with the diplomacy. There's a problem with Western diplomacy, that Western diplomacy do not listening, okay? I recognize and I believe that Ukrainian nation can have the aspiration toward the European Union, okay? I support this aspiration because I have clear my passport that I have is a passport of Poland, but also the passport of European Union. I'm European Union citizen, okay? So I have also this position that the European Union is bringing the development to countries. I see like how my country changed after the accession to European Union. And I believe that Ukrainian people also want to have such, let's say modernization, such evolution, okay? But yes, the Russia has different point of view. The Russia has still thinking of the sphere of influence, okay? As the person, let's say, investigating, let's say, researching the military defense system, offensive, defensive, I can say that, okay, so for example, the anti-missile base in Poland, hey, you can change the missile, and the missile that is from the land to air could be, let's say, changed, could be reprogrammized to be used like land to land. It's not the problem for the technical people, yes. So, okay, so yes, there is some, let's say, aspects of the Russian politics that they are not ignored in the West. Okay, you can say that it's irrational, that it's a threat, but even irrational threat, you need to rationalize. Okay,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your answer.
Something wrong happened. I believe in with the diplomacy. Yes, with the diplomacy on the ground. Okay, so but if you even look at the international organization, OSCE, yes, the order of OSCE. The order of OSCE was built on 1972, the Helsinki Conference. What was the Helsinki Conference? It was the first component was the military. The military itself to divide the rules, to limit the level of the, let's say, of the armies, trying to control, trying to avoid arms race, trying to avoid the conflict, the military conflicts. Yes, and we have the even during like some anniversaries of the OSCE a few years ago, that many people, many experts in the West were saying that there is there must be, let's say, new life put into the OSCE. Okay, but how? it's going to be built. That there must be, let's say, that there is that the organization, international organization, were built for the different period, let's say, period of time, for the different international situation, and the new security environment somehow must be, let's say, informed. Okay, so I believe that NATO needs now to, let's say, rethink, let's say, some positions. Okay, maybe to find the solution also for the Ukraine that would be acceptable for Russia. Okay.
So if I could just come in here and ask, we do have another question online. I'll get to that.
Yes, yes.
But before that,
okay.
I'd just like to ask, continues to what you were saying. You've mentioned that there has been certainly an issue with Western diplomacy as far as how they have taken Russia's repeated assertions, particularly with the respect of NATO, but also on other issues with regard to Ukraine, how it hasn't really got across to the Western side quite a bit. So my question is, what does this now mean for other nations in Eastern Europe, in Central Europe, who aren't at the moment NATO allies or even European Union members? There are quite a few signals already that some of these nations, for example, are rethinking their entry to either of these bodies. There's reports coming that Moldova and Georgia, for example, are considering fast-tracking EU membership. Reports saying that Finland and Sweden are reconsidering joining the NATO, and that particularly from these two Scandinavian nations, particularly Sweden, well known for their stances on neutrality for so long during the Cold War. And of course, let's not forget its own military industrial might, is also significant steps which are coming out as a reaction to what's unfolding in Ukraine. So you're pointing out, and I believe that's a view held quite commonly here in India, that with the further easternward expansion of NATO, Russia is being pushed into a corner where it decides to actually become a belligerent in the international system. If more such nations in Europe start moving towards the NATO fold, particularly and also the EU fold, how is that likely to go down in Moscow? How is it likely to be received? What is your take on that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, now we got to the tipping point. Okay, unfortunately, the tipping point was not, let's say, used in diplomatic way. Okay, the Russia actually was pushing towards the tipping point, was pushing West, NATO, European Union, United Nations, United States to, let's say, for some deal. But the deal didn't happen. The war happened, unfortunately. Okay. We see the acceleration within the European Union, within the, let's say, case, yes, with the Ukraine, okay, the acceleration of the accession of the Ukraine. Okay, and now it's as soon as possible, I believe, Ukraine is going to get the status of the candidate to European Union. Okay, because now it is the application, there is support from European Parliament, so we'll see like what will be the fast track, let's say, application process. I would say it's not simple to join European Union. Okay, if you see that how Poland joined the European Union, it was a long process of bringing the law to the, let's say, to the European standards. It was a long process of the modernization. It's expensive. It's expensive. There's also at the expenses of the European member states. Okay, it's going to be costly to bring Ukraine to European Union. Okay, but the Europe now, at least political level, accepted those costs. Okay, the Ukraine must be rebuilt. It would be very costly. Okay, other states. Okay, Georgia. Okay, Georgia. You see, like because the Ukraine called the ambassadors from Kyrgyzstan and from Georgia. that they didn't support the Ukrainian stance. Okay, Georgia, okay, didn't want to follow the let's say sanctions against Russia because Georgia understand how the sanctions, how the let's say the trade disputes with Russia, which is huge let's say economic partner of Georgia, influence the economy. But now they applying for the European let's say Union candidate status. Okay, so they using this wave also to join. The same with Moldova. Okay, but Moldova is the poorest country in Europe. You see, like, okay, you can accept Moldova as a candidate, but you need to put such a huge amount of the money to bring, okay? So it's very difficult, okay? I believe if Russia is going to accept the expansion of the European Union, I'm listening to Russian experts. They more, let's say, they more like moderate about the European Union, okay? Because the European Union is more about the economy. Of course, European Union has the military, let's say, common security and defense component, okay? Also, European Union also decided to, let's say, to support armament of Ukraine during the conflict. So it's not, let's say, 100% now, let's say, political economic organization. The military component is there. So, but it's more acceptable for Russia, okay? But we'll see, like, we still don't know how this compromise concerning the Ukraine would look like, okay? Because we have, okay, we have the political level, but we have this national level, we have the people suffering on the ground, and how does people would live in such compromise, okay? So we'll see. NATO, you see, NATO still, okay, I don't know, like today there would be a meeting, some discussions in Brussels, but the NATO try not to engage, let's say, on the ground. The NATO is sending the armaments to Ukraine, the NATO's member states, but NATO is still refusing to close the sky over Ukraine, because still the people, okay, if we go to the NATO, they are military type people. They know that closing the skies would lead to the confrontation, because if you have the NATO planes over the Ukraine, you will have the Russian planes over the Ukraine. Okay. Yesterday, or there was information from the Ukrainian side that Poland is going to hand over military planes to Ukraine, and some of the military planes going to use Polish military, let's say, airports, okay, for the operation in Ukraine. But then, after a few hours, the Polish government stated no, the Polish airports is not going to be used, okay, the aerodromes. So NATO trying to avoid, let's say, direct confrontation, but NATO also need to think that there would be, let's say, red lines. There must be red lines, okay? Okay, the sanctions, the escalations, I was, let's say, thinking that it's not going to escalate so fast. But now it's more look like the Iron Curtain, okay? But now we don't know how this Iron Curtain would work, because you have the contacts between the NATO and Soviet Union. There was some, let's say, lines that should not be crossed, yes? Now we still don't know, okay? There would be, I believe that there will be still, in concern to the conflict in Ukraine, I believe that there would be the role for such countries as China, as India, to actually to negotiate in the conflict, to bring the conflict, because in the European Union, if you look like who can really help to solve the problems, it's very difficult to find the countries that could support, yes, because you have Turkey, but Turkey is a member of NATO, yes, the candidate to European Union. So it was even difficult to find a place to negotiate. Okay, the Switzerland. Okay, I'm surprised that Switzerland decided to follow the sanctions. Okay, in concern of Finland, if Finland is going to join the NATO, I guess yes. I guess yes, it's going to be this curtain. Okay, the curtain is changing. Okay, this is the end of the Finlandization of the Finland, I would say. Okay, but if you see like who was the idea of the Finlandization? Okay, it was the Mannerheim. It was the Mannerheim. It was military guy that actually like fought the Russians in different. First he was serving in the Tsarist army, but then he fought the Russians. But then he also understand that there must be some, let's say, compromise, some solution. And the Finlandization, it was not the discussion only between the, let's say, the West and the Soviet Union. It was also the role of the Mannerheim to bring some solution to his own country for the cold, let's say, during the Cold War. So now that is the what would be the solution? I hope in few days there would be some, but I don't see the leadership, still the leadership from the Western side of, let's say, for bringing such solution. Okay. So this is the conflict that still I don't see, for example, the solution. Okay, the proposal from the Russian side, they're unacceptable for the Ukrainians.
Right.
So very difficult to find a compromise.
Yeah. Shall we take other questions? Sir?
Yes, please.
There was a hand raised online, although I do not see that anymore. Okay, we'll just come to questions from the students here. Anybody? Yeah, you want to come up? Just 1 second.
Hello, sir. Thank you for the lecture. I have just 2 direct questions. We are constantly flooded with the information that Russia has actually strategically failed to achieve what it wanted to do in its early moves. And you said in your talk that Russia was planned for a protracted and a long warfare with the Ukraine. So I just wanted to know what made you come up with that observation. And also in this, we are getting very uncertain news regarding this crisis which is going on. So which ones to actually rely upon? Because there are a lot of fake news. We have seen that Russian tanks have taken over, Russian groups have taken over Kyiv, and also especially there's a lot of thing that nuclear level confrontation is going to take place. So what do we, where do we actually rely upon? So these are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. But I would say, that is also, let's say, the nightmare of today's world. Okay, that we have too much information. Okay, and we need to understand that the first, let's say, victim of the war is true. Yes. And we'll have, let's say, the interpretations, the discourses of 2, let's say, belligerent sides. But what is happening on the ground? Okay, you will see the different maps. It's the easiest. Okay, when the Russians, they are showing the maps, they would show the colorized territory that they control, something like this, the huge area of Ukraine. But in fact, and it's I would say it's somehow normal, yes, that they control some main roads, okay, to have the supply for the army that is advancing. Sometimes the advancements, they are stopped, okay. So this is not, I would say, this is not successful operation for the Russian side. Okay, we see the engagement of the, let's say, if we understand, trying to look at the land forces, okay, and the Ukrainian side is demonstrating the Russian tanks that were captured, even not the, let's say, not the oldest version of the Russian tanks, okay, but I would say that I still don't see the most advanced tanks of the Russian involved. I don't see the Armata tanks. So I don't know why. I could guess that Russia do not want to risk the Armata tanks being engaged in some conflict because Russia could be afraid that this weapon is going to be captured or destroyed. Okay, because even the Armata tanks, they could be destroyed by javelins, I would say, or Panzerfaust 4, the Germans. And such weapon is in the hand of the Ukrainian forces. Okay, this okay, the different information concerning casualties. Yes, the levels. Okay, the Ukrainians saying that the Russian army casualties, they are numbering like 5,000 soldiers. Okay, the Russians, they confirm that this like approximately 600. Okay, so the huge differences, okay. If we're discussing the international humanitarian law, we need also, okay, we need also to see that I saw some videos of the, let's say, captured Russian soldiers. Yes, and there are some in international law. It's written how, let's say, prisoners of wars could be treated. Okay, it's not exactly that you bringing the prison of war and please tell me to the camera that you're the bad guy and you don't know what you're doing here. Yes, it's not the best, let's say, solution, and such issues must be investigated. That would be huge work of the let's say of the international organization to see who was shelling, let's say, who was firing at whom and where, and what are the and who caused the collateral damages, who caused the harm to civilians. There will be huge, let's say, investigation inquiries of international commission, and they must decide what happened, yes, and where. Okay, to find the real information now. No, it's very difficult. Okay, now it's difficult to know. It's today in Russian presidential in Russian Duma, Russian Parliament. They discussing probably they voted for the law that would allow to sentence people for 3 to 10 and even to 15 years of prison for let's say distributing the information that is classified as fake or is acting against the defense of Russia. So you see that in Russia, the people would be afraid to talk, would be afraid to discuss the conflict, because you must be aware that your information, your message could be classified as fake, as manipulation of the information, and so on and so on. Okay, in Ukraine, you can discuss. In Europe, you can discuss. Okay, in Europe, for example, it's also discussable because also your information could be classified as manipulation of information as a fake. Okay, but it would be more like ostracism. The society or the other political expert would call you that you're supporting the Russian version, you're supporting the justification of the war. Okay, that's why it's difficult on both sides to operate with the truth. But still, in Europe, you don't have such law that would, let's say, allow the authorities to put you in the prison. Okay, that is the difficulties. Of course, that is the let's say the human level, because on media level, you have, let's say, the confrontation of both sides. The Russia is blocking the Western sources. The West is blocking Russian sources. Okay, and we see that it's escalating. We see the YouTube, we see the Facebook acting as a, let's say, as a censors. Yes, they applying censorship. So it will be more and more difficult. Okay, and we have the fog of war. We need to understand that if the war is going on, this would be difficult. Okay, I'm trying to look what are the communication of the United Nations, okay, on the ground, with in concern to casualties, to see what are they, also the Red Cross, to have this information, because okay, I'm listening to Russian side, listening to Ukrainian side, trying to compare somehow, but for the United Nations is still for me the source of the information concerning the casualties, concerning the actions, concerning the humanitarian corridors. Okay, so that is where I would look, like what they are bringing. With even the fakes are everywhere. The videos are manipulated. Okay, so both sides they're using. There was this famous, let's say, Russian ships go fuck yourself. Yes. So there was this very, let's say, this patriotic Ukrainian video that on the island of Zmyny, and the Ukrainian defenders refused to give up the weapon and were destroyed by the Russian enemy. That was the story. But then it happens that Ukrainian defenders were captured and they were transferred to Sevastopol. Okay, so it's talk of war, I would say. Okay, there are stories to actually to accelerate the patriotism in Ukraine, because they're defending their country. Okay, you using such stories. It's more, let's say, for me, it's more acceptable that the Ukrainians they're using some manipulation. Maybe they underline some, let's say, the victories because they're defending. Then the Russian manipulations that trying to, let's say, to justify the military operation, the further advancement. Okay, it's not the Ukrainian troops on the Russian soil. Okay, they are the Russian troops on the Ukrainian soil. Okay.
Okay. Shall we take some more questions?
Yes, please.
Yeah. The next question.
Hello, Dr. Ozierski. Nice to listen to you today. My name is Anupama, PhD candidate here at the Department of Geopolitics, Mahi. So you mentioned that your PhD, the research area that you looked at for your PhD was to look at missile defenses. So the two questions I'll be asking you are from that broad area. My first question, sir, is that is the recent US withdrawal from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, could that in any way directly or indirectly cause this situation, or has had anything to do with the situation that's happening in Ukraine right now? Coming to my second question. So we often come across the European Union to be referred to as a normative power in literature, as opposed to a great power. This is because the European Union doesn't have certain traditional markers that are associated with great power, including, let's say, military or nuclear weapons. I understand that post-1990s, the relevance of nuclear weapons in power calculations or status calculations have been increasingly relegated. But in this instance, in Ukraine, Putin is showing that without even using the nuclear weapon, there is immense coercive value that no other power resource provides that's coming from the nuclear weapon. So in this background, do you think there's any possibility that the EU, EU has already shifted its policy stance and agreed to export weapons to Ukraine? Yes. But do you see the EU looking at militarizing seriously and acquiring a nuclear weapon, although that's really far-fetched? And would then the French nuclear umbrella extend to the EU? And does the NATO treaty prevent France from doing it? If you could just give your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Okay. If European Union, yes, the European Union don't need directly to, let's say, to be involved in nuclear deterrence as an institution, I would say. because there is NATO, there are NATO member states in the European Union. Okay, so you have the nuclear sharing agreements between the United States and some European Union members. You can, let's say, the nuclear weapon is there. It's in Europe, yes. It depends like what is the nature of nuclear weapon is that is going to be, let's say, there, okay? Because of course, nuclear, let's say, the bombs with, I would say, nuclear warheads, yes, they are, okay. They are probably in Germany, okay, and they are in Great Britain, they are in France, okay. In France, Great Britain is different, okay. But the positioning of the nuclear weapon and the direct, let's say, role in positioning of nuclear weapon in Europe, it's not the role of European Union. Okay, there's the agreements between the certain NATO member states, and it would be very wrong if it would escalate if there would be more proliferation of the nuclear weapon. Okay, you as India, you have the experience with atomic weapon. You have the balance with another, let's say, nuclear power. You have with Pakistan, and thus the weapon that is actually deterring you to confront each other. Yes, so that is the reason actually, like the reason they had something behind, let's say, the people that dealing with the nuclear weapon to form certain balance, not to cross the line. Okay, okay. In Russia, let's say rhetoric, it's often used that that Ukraine, if Ukraine would join NATO, there would be, let's say, nuclear warheads on the territory of Ukraine. Yes, but it's not like this. Not all the countries in NATO, they agree and they support nuclear proliferation, I would say. So if it's nuclear weapon, it's not the European Union, I would say. The Russia and Russian deterrence, they're applying, okay, the missile, okay, the missile, the long, the middle range missiles, okay, all the agreements between the United Nations and Soviet Union that were later, let's say, transferred to Russia, they were done in different world, okay, because there was the agreement between two sides, but we cannot forget that there is also China that has the missile technologies to develop, and this is for them, for Russia. Okay, the Russia could diminish. Okay, now the Russia do not consider the China as, let's say, the threat. Okay, before it was different, but still, I believe that the both sides, the United States, Russia, could find the agreement, not to proliferate not to, let's say, enter into, let's say, arms race again, I would say, like it was before the Soviet Union and Russia. So don't really think that the both sides could not find, let's say, the solution. Okay, it's difficult to find. Unfortunately, the people that were writing the agreements, okay, mostly of them, they are not now, let's say, directly involved in the, let's say, in the political process in both in the United States and Russia, because if you see like how these agreements were established, how the control regimes were established, they were the people with the experience, with the personal experience of the World War II. Yes, so they mindset was different. They know the enemy, they know how the weapon work, how why they need to control such weapon, yes, as the delivery systems, as nuclear weapon, and so on. Now we have the situation that, in my opinion, we discuss too much on Facebook, on TikToks, that we shall not, let's say, that we shall, let's say, defend our values. And yes, of course, defend our values, but we need to have in mind that we need to avoid, let's say, the escalation and avoid, let's say, mutual destruction. Okay, those terms, they are not new. The people forgot about the consequences. Okay, it's I also like see that this escalation, for example, in Polish internet about the war, let's say, let's go, let's say, let's fight, and so on. But it's the war. It's the war. It should be discussed it should be stopped, and the solution must be discussed. The balance must be discussed by experts, but the people that know about more about nuclear weapon, missile delivery systems, and so on, so on. Okay, so I still believe there is a space. Okay, in such areas, it's more, let's say, space for the discussion than now in the conflict. And I don't think that such weapon is going to be, let's say, applied in this conflict. Okay, next question, please.
Okay, there's a question online. So could you go ahead? Devashish Das.
Hi, good evening. This is Devashish Das. I am a PhD scholar from Central University of Kerala, and it's a very wonderful presentation. And I have actually two questions. I will just make it a very brief one. The first question I have, that the sanctions that you were talking about, it is basically what we have found from the report coming, that it is not only limited to the to Russia only, because recently the news has come that with regard to S-400 defense missile systems, Turkey and India is going to be under the radar of the sanctions from the United States. This is the first question. And what is your take on this? Because India has abstained from the UNSC voting, and along with other 34 countries. And my second question is, we are actually focusing about NATO much, but on the other hand, there is a counterpower, which is CSTO, Collective Security Treaty Organization. We have seen in last month what happened in Kazakhstan, and it was the first time when CSTO was applied in Kazakhstan. So wouldn't that be a possibility that if NATO is not expanded, by virtue, if Ukraine is captured, then there would be a possibility of expanding the CSTO from the eastern side to the other side, because that way Russia would be able to prove its power. So what is your take on these two questions? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I would start from the CSTO. Okay, because it happened that I was maybe I'm of the few people in Europe that were actually in the building of the secretary of CSTO in Moscow. And it, for many, let's say, people dealing with Russia, they say that after the crisis in Kazakhstan in January, people were, many experts were surprised that CSTO is working. Why they were surprised? I don't know, because if you're really interested in Russia, you need to understand that CSTO is the organization that was, let's say, constantly developing and modernizing itself, especially since 2010. Okay, and again, we are returning to the Kyrgyzstan, because in 2010 there was discussion if CSTO forces could be applied to the, let's say, turmoil, to the Osh events, to the inter-ethnic clashes in the south of Kyrgyzstan. And then it was stated that no, it cannot. Okay, but later there was, let's say, modernization also of, let's say, evolution of the documents, status of CSTO, and in 2022 it could be used. it could be used for the internal, let's say, internal conflict in Kazakhstan on the request of the Kazakh government. Okay. But for example, the CSTO could not be applied in Karabakh conflict because Armenia do not recognize Karabakh as its territory. Yes, so it was the internal, let's say, conflict between Azerbaijan. Okay, so then it couldn't be like CSTO applied. If say CSTO could be, let's say, applied in Ukrainian crisis. Okay. I would say not at this stage. Okay, not at this stage. Not on the request of Russia, of course, but I cannot exclude such situation because I still trying to understand what Russia wants. Okay, and Russia also wants. Russia is using the Ukraine sometimes in the explanation as the confronting of the Ukrainian dreams of being a NATO member. Okay, so maybe it would be acceptable for the NATO, for the Russia, for the Kremlin, because it would actually support its, let's say, narrative that NATO would actually secure one part of the Ukraine from the one side, and on the second, let's say, on the other part, maybe the CSTO could be applied. Why not? Yes, if we discuss the scenario, so why not? But it's the CSTO. We need to remember there must be consensus between the members to apply to use the CSTO forces actually to secure, let's say the civilians. Okay, we need to. There must be consensus between Armenia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and they must be, let's say, accept to be involved and how they could be involved. Okay, we need to understand that CSTO has the status of collective organization with United Nations, also with the OSCE, so could be used as, let's say, peacekeeping forces. Could be used. Okay, so I cannot exclude such situation that the CSTO could be applied on the territories that could be somehow controlled by Russia, and the NATO forces on the other side could be used by NATO. But this is something that must be negotiated. Something that must be negotiated. Okay, it could if it could be accepted by Kremlin. I don't know, but it would support the Kremlin narrative somehow. So maybe that is the solution concerning the CSTO and NATO, but we need to remember that this is still the United Nations, and the United Nations and Security Council must play the huge role in this case. So yes, maybe some, let's say, form of peacekeeping forces under United Nations, let's say, name on the ground, and they could be composed by CSTO from one side, from the other side by NATO. Yes, we'll see. Okay, this is the form of the compromise that the people on the table discussing peacekeeping, let's say, peace solution for the Ukraine must take in mind. Okay, so CSTO from one side and NATO, one of the solution maybe. Sanctions. Okay, they United States and sanctions, they always have this universal nature that the United Nations is pushing other states to use this. Okay, even you can. The United States is also sanctioning the European companies that trading cigars from Cuba. Yes. So even they don't have any direct interest in United States. So if United States is pushing like to stop the arms, let's say deliveries, to stop arms trade from Russia, yes. But from one side we have this political, but we need to remember that the arm industry in Russia it's also a huge part of the export. It's huge part of the inflow of the money. So it's still the arm could, let's say, to make sanctions more effective from the Western perspective, you need to hit certain areas of the economy, and arm industry is one of the area. No, so like how if it will be difficult. The arm industry in Russia, it's a huge inflow of money. It's a huge inflow of foreign currency to the Russian budget. The inflow that Western sanctions want to stop. Okay. Then the next is oil and gas. Yes. How this inflow is going to be stopped, and what kind of sacrifice is going to make the West to stop this inflow? The next question. Yes. So we'll see. Okay.
In fact, based of everything that you've been saying, and really not choosing to take the easy path out, I must say, sir, you're giving us to the questions that we are asking very pointed answers, and I must say answers not just realming in, not just staying in the realm of political correctness, but you're actually speaking your mind, and that's certainly something that we are extremely interested here to listen to. In fact, there are quite a bunch of questions that are waiting for you, but I'll just pick out maybe 2 or 3 and get them across to you. And it's already 1.5 hours that we've taken. So I'll quickly come to some of these final questions. But before that, I would just like to take 2 minutes also to talk about something that you said in terms of when you were answering a question regarding diplomacy and whether, or rather of how diplomacy could and should have been the answer. It should not have reached where it has reached today in this particular moment of time. But then you also said you're not exactly sure as to how things will end up now or where they will end. You said what Russia is offering certainly not viable for Ukraine and vice versa, right? And I just want to bring the attention back also to what is it that Russia is saying in a sense, right? We have the situation happening. You yourself alluded to everything which has been happening since 2014. And going off UN reports itself, there have been around 20,000 deaths in the Donbas region since 2014 when the Minsk Protocol first, and then in 2015, Minsk II was signed, right? This includes both fighters as well as civilians. Civilian death toll roughly around close to between 9,000 and 10,000 is what the UN report from 2014 up until the beginning of this conflict last month. And that, of course, is justification that President Putin is using in Russia. But it also begs the question as to when things do get settled and you have the two now Russian recognized independent people's republics of Luhansk and Donetsk. Let's not forget that the representatives of these two bodies also signed the Minsk Protocol along with Ukraine, Russia, and the Trilateral Contact Group. So this is not really a case where the representatives of Donetsk and Luhansk, so-called people's republics, and do not have a seat at the table. Maybe their seat at the table is being entirely controlled by Russia. There's no doubt about that. But it is they are part of the negotiations as well. And when things come about settling what is happening or moving on the ground today, the reality of what is geographically true happening in the region would still have a key implication. And I was looking at the maps earlier today, and you look at Donetsk, of course, the Donetsk Oblast on the Sea of Azov, right? You have the southern Ukrainian region coming under increased attack from the naval and then amphibious forces of Russia. First, the port of Odessa, the seaport of Odessa, but also cities such as Mykolaiv and Kherson, which are also ports on the both on the Dnieper River and as well as leading into the Black Sea region, the catchment region. So one part of what looks to be happening, at least in the conventional invasion of the last, let's say, 4 to 5 days, from when the first talks failed, you could perhaps draw a line there and say that conventional warfare at full scale began on the day of February 28th. And since then, if you look at what's been happening, there seems to be a Russian assault or effort to try and cut off and try and make Ukraine a landlocked country, right? Cut off access to the Sea of Azov, cut off access to the Black Sea, and also simultaneously to control territories eastwards of the Dnieper River. Now that starts all the way up to on the very first day of the conflict. We all saw what happened in Chernobyl, the Chernobyl exclusion zone and the Chernihiv town, which is close to that. So from that northern territory on the Dnieper River, all the way down through Kiev, through Cherky, through the city of Dnipro, and then right down to Kherson. Now that's another, let's say, strategy which seems to be playing out in recent days, where Russia looks to be trying to gather control of everything eastward of that, while they're preparing for, of course, the siege of Kiev. Now, so where I'm getting to is it in Russia's mind not just Yanukovych coming back as a puppet and reinstalling a puppet regime? Is it also that they want to, like you're mentioning to some extent as well, a split east of the river? A split east of the river, at least with Donetsk and Luhansk, as well as the remaining regions northwards through to Kharkiv and all the way down. A split south and east of the river, which would remain under Russian control even after troops pull back. Is this something which is, when you're talking of end games and master strategies, is this something which, to your point of view, is this something likely that Vladimir Putin is likely to push to? And this links to what you mentioned when you were talking of the language issue as well, right? You were saying the old order is gone. Certainly, there are bilingual people in Ukraine. Certainly, it used to be the case that the Russian-speaking populace leaned more towards Moscow, but that has been changing on ground over the years, as you mentioned. And this seems to be an effort by Moscow to go back, right? Set the picture back and return to how things were before 2000, the situations have been changing, as you rightly been saying. So is this something that Russia is looking at in terms of their end game?
Okay, that was like many Russian experts say, like, that Russia wants something, want to reinstall Yanukovych, to do something, but this is Fuantarei, yes, you cannot enter the same water. It's not the same water. It's totally different situation. Okay, to rely on Yanukovych is compromised person for the Ukrainian people. Okay, you can build the recognition of DNR, LNR, Donetsk and Lugansk Republic. Yes, that was the question, because the military operation didn't start directly after the recognition, but when the recognition happened, there was ongoing discussion. What about the borders of those two republics? Yes, two unrecognized republics, and they were recognized in line with the borders of Oblast, of the regions, yes, of Donetsk region and Lugansk region of Ukraine. So if you see that what was before, like 2014, so the Lugansk was also the Mariupol. Now the Mariupol that is now Besek, that the clashes that are happening there. And when there was, let's say, the simple explanation of the military, let's say, people that what Russia want in military, let's say, military, let's say, context, there was that Russia wants to have the land corridor to Crimea. Simple explanation: the land corridor is going to the Mariupol, then to the Crimea. Russia wants to open the water for the Crimea channel, and that's end. And maybe later Russia wants to go to the Dnipro River as a border, okay, because it's easier to defend. But it's very costly. It's very costly to, let's say, to secure the land, to control the land. It's you have the territorial defense of Ukraine that is growing, is skyrocketing every day. Yes, the people getting the guns in their hands. Okay, so and it's very costly for the Kremlin to keep, let's say, advancement to try to control the land. I was surprised that Russia decided to let's say encircle Kharkiv, Donetsk, and even started to enter the city to engage in city, let's say, city fighting. It's very difficult from the military point of view, and I don't think that Russia is ready to prolong for a long time. Yes, but my, let's say, the colleagues in Russia, they preferring for the long war. But how this war is going to look like, I'm afraid that Russia is going to, let's say, to use the, let's say, full-scale artillery, let's say, towards the cities, or the Air Force is going to the, let's say, aerial bombings. Yes, I'm afraid of this, that Russia would try to justify somehow that is happening. But now what we see, there are the cases of undiscriminated fire, the Grad missiles are systems that are there, and but you cannot win such war. You cannot win such war. You cannot control for the long time. I believe that even the Russia understand this. The Kremlin must understand this, that you cannot control this area, that you must find some solution to maybe to gain some political gains, but you need to withdraw the military. It's not. I would say that you can, in such situation, you cannot find a win-win situation. Even, yes, you need to have the Russia try to save its face somehow, but it's very difficult. Let's say the political phase. It's very difficult now to withdraw, to stop the operation. Okay, and I believe that the third actors must be involved, the China, the India, and somehow to press to look for the solutions that would be acceptable for Russia. To be acceptable for Russia, because for the acceptable, okay, I guess now for the Ukraine, the acceptable solution just to stop the military operation. And so, no, it's difficult. It's difficult because we are in the time of the war, okay, and it's difficult to propose some solutions. It's difficult, okay. I'm afraid that someone would say that what I'm talking is just justification of war. No, and I'm avoiding justification of the war. Yes, but I also believe that you need to stop the war, start to discuss, and I also think that sanctions is not the solution. Okay. Okay, you can build the new world order, but you must build the world order that would bring the prosperity, yes? And sanctions, they're hitting both sides. They do not allow, let's say, both sides. The financial, let's say, all the programs of the World Bank, for example, for in Russia and Belarus was stopped. Asian IEB bank also stopped its programs for Russia and Belarus. Okay, so it's hitting the development system of the world. It is the institutions that help to develop the economies, that facilitated the development, the modernization in very different states. And this system is now being shaked. And the role of the diplomacy now is to find a solution from this war, to stop the war and find a solution and start to discuss, to build something that would be, let's say, that could work, that the people would not stop to talk, to discuss. Okay, I understand now we have the situation that the people from the West is there blocking the Russian people, but we must understand, okay, I believe that we need to discuss with the Russian people. Okay, there are such moves to block the Russian scientific world, to block the Russian business. But this is not ad hoc. Maybe it's justified, but in the long term, you need to rebuild. But the problem is not to destroy everything, all the links, all the communications. Okay. So
I believe that might actually be a very good place to, because certainly there is no end to these discussions. There is certainly no end, unfortunately, to this war at this moment of time as well. And as with each passing day, we're seeing the situation get graver, not just in terms of the type of weaponry, the type of the assault itself, the regions that it's progressing to, getting closer to civilian centers, not just in those terms, but also we're seeing escalation happening, saber rattling happening at multiple levels as well, right from the level of the Russian president and his defense minister as well, where the nuclear threat, the nuclear coercion has now, the phrase has now come out 4 times in the midst of this particular conflict, including today. And today we also, not certainly from the nuclear weapon point of view, but also had saw the fall of Ukraine's largest nuclear power plant with six reactors of 950 megawatts each, have been taken over by Russia. And, so the situation is evolving. This again, as I mentioned, the area where this particular reactor is, Zaporizhzhia. Sorry, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. Please check that out yourself. But the place where this is happening again on the Dnieper River, again crucially situated in the southern region in terms of where it's going to, and providing about 1/5 of Ukraine's overall electricity power generation, and being wintered again. So of course it can be the Russians are already claiming it is a tactical game, and that they're promising that nothing would happen in terms of a radiation leak or anything from those from this takeover, but still it was certainly an alarming situation today morning in India to wake up to images of fire breaking out in the nuclear power reactor there, rather in the premises there. So this conflict is evolving. There are newer angles to it coming in every day. In between, for example, you had mentioned the 70 flights or the 70 fighter aircrafts, which apparently would be handed over from Poland. And there was always a question at that moment being raised. If they had to go back and land in Poland, would that not be seen as Russia, or rather Russia see that as NATO entering directly into the conflict and things like that? And now you've given us the information that there has been a repeal of that particular, at least in terms of the re-landing of the aircraft from Poland side. So these are all things which are evolving, and all of them have multiple pictures that the governments of various nation states are trying to look at. And what you ended with, sir, I would say, if I may, this is something which the government of India has been saying from day one. And particularly the Prime Minister himself is believed to have conveyed convey directly to President Putin the need for all parties to sit and discuss. So far, the discussions we've seen certainly haven't gone anywhere, but it is undoubted that is the only way forward in terms of diplomacy, is the only way forward to end this conflict, as well as not just to stop, have a ceasefire, but also to have lasting peace in Europe. I mean, the construct of Europe, the construct of a pacifist Europe, which has been doing the rounds ever since the end of the Cold War, certainly may not have been in keeping with much of European history, right? But it's been efforts which are being made. In fact, we have international relations streams, theoretical streams itself coming out of this whole, let's say, endeavor. But that whole notion of a pacifist, of a peaceful Europe has been destroyed over the last few days. And we will see where it goes to, and we will see how the EU, a lot of what has already been done has been brilliantly covered by our speaker. And of course, there will be more actions to keep, taking a look at. It's a key moment in international relations, international history. And at the department here, we will certainly be keeping much more of a closer eye on and having more discussions, for which we will certainly be getting back to you, sir, given your time and your availability. We will certainly be looking to expand and maybe have more such discussions in the future. So I think it's been a good long 2 hours of discussing. Certainly we can't say discussing threadbare because there are so many facets to this, but whatever we could have and has been flagged by the students as well in terms of the questions has been answered. So we will stop today's proceedings here after a formal vote of thanks. I would like to invite Vidhi, a master's student here, to present the formal vote of thanks. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Ozierski, for an insightful lecture. You posed some really relevant questions like what could be the Russian objective in carrying out the military aggression in Ukraine. Further, briefly talking about NATO, you also pointed out that the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is not an ethnic one, and that the changing perspectives of both countries is a major bone of contention. Thank you once again, sir, for addressing us and sharing your valuable insights. I would further like to thank Vineet for moderating the session. We are extremely grateful to Dr. Anand for organizing this session. Lastly, I would like to thank a vibrant audience. We see participants from various universities as well as from MAHE and students of Department of Geopolitics and International Relations and our alumni from India and abroad. Thank you all for patient listening and active participation.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity.
See you once again later.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to discuss, maybe to bring different perceptions, but also, let's say, we need to study. We need to study the war. We need to study the peace, but we need to remember not to, let's say, forget about the human face of everything what we are doing. And in such situation, the best option actually is to call to stop. Yes, to call to stop the war and to discuss, to find what was mentioned, the long-lasting peace somehow, because the war peace is better than war, I would say. Okay.
Let's hope that happens very soon. And thank you once again.
Okay. Thank you very much.